Good morning or afternoon, good day, everybody. Welcome to In on the Conversation, IOTC, episode 6. I'm your host, Pam Singh, and I'm with the wonderful, amazing Laura Matsue. Laura is a holistic coach, writer, blogger extraordinaire. She's doing some amazing things, and I can't wait for you to be in on this conversation with us. So, Laura, welcome to the show.
Hi, Pam. Nice to finally meet you.
I know, right? So I want to get into this and actually go into your backstory of how spirituality and meditation practices and how this practice has become such an integral part of your life. Like, what's your story into evolving who Laura Matsue is today?
Well, in this lifetime, I actually grew up around like more of like a Hindu type spirituality. Like my parents had a guru and they were in this organization called Siddha Yoga.
Okay.
So I was not like basically scared of it, but it took me a long time to actually find my own path.
Right.
I had a really I've suffered from depression from when I was like 14. I had my whole 20s was just experiences of like sexual abuse, addiction. It got like crazy dark for me.
Wow.
Basically. And so that was also kind of my epic dark night of the soul in this lifetime. And around my Saturn return, which happens around age 27, 28, I had basically my first awakening experiences. Like things were so bad at that time. Mm-hmm. I had just gotten out of detox. I was in like pretty much just an abusive relationship. Wow. And it was so bad that I thought it was a nightmare at one point. I was like, oh my God, like wake me up. This can't be real. This is like, it felt like literally hell on earth, which is actually true. It was a state of consciousness of that place. And and I heard this quote, I forget, I wish I knew what book it was in. Who knows? Maybe it was like a mainstream movie about if you have nothing left to do, you can at least pray. And I was like, okay, well, I actually have nothing left to do. I need to find a place to go because I had to get out of that situation really quickly. And I tried it. And then within like a few seconds, someone who I hadn't heard from in years, like reached their hand out basically and like offered me a place to stay. Like they were kind of like my in-between space while I kind of had to rebuild my life.
Right.
And and then from there, I basically had to rebuild my whole mind, body, and spirit through yoga, meditation, different psychological self-work. And that was in like end of 2012. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so extraordinary. Like that's a lot that you just, like that's a lot of unpackaging and then transmuting a lot of that, like you just said, darkness back into light again, and then finding your way back into, I don't know, this practice.
Yeah. So like the path of like the Bodhisattva, I realized even when I was back in that experience, I was like, there was a knowing in me that I had to experience like these depths of human suffering so I could really be of service to others. Like I think until we go through our own process, like we can't really demonstrate true compassion and empathy for other people because, you know, like we have to experience that ourselves. So it was like a part of a larger kind of lesson at the same time.
Right. So, okay. So with compassion and empathy, so, I mean, do you consider yourself an empath, and like how do you define what an empath is for somebody who's gone through, you know, these challenges and this darkness?
Yeah, I mean, I know that I'm very emotionally sensitive. Like for people who buy into astrology, I have a Cancer moon, so I'm very in tune with people emotionally, but I definitely don't label myself like as an empath. I think that that's a whole like trap in itself where you're like, oh, I'm like an empath, like I need to protect myself from the world or whatever.
Yeah, because that's there though. I mean, that literature is there of the empath, and could you go more into that then?
Yeah, so like, and I actually found out about this because I'm studying like meditation courses at the Shambhala Center now, and I'm taking a course on fearlessness, and it talks about how basically like shyness and is not wanting to confront our fear. So I think that with people who are more empathic, like they can sometimes use it as like almost an excuse to not like meet situations directly. I know I did that. That's why I know that other people do it. So it's like, oh, I'm hypersensitive. I can't do this. I can't do that.
Yes, I hear that.
But it's like, yes, you're hypersensitive, and yes, it's like brings a new challenge for being in the world, but you also have to learn how to meet those situations directly. Like that's like the true spiritual warrior, like being like, if you really want to be of service to others, this means to meet someone in the depths of their suffering and being able to be there with them through that. Like that's a test of strength, not being like, oh, I'm empathic, I need to kind of live in my
Create
own little world.
space and get
Yeah.
away from it.
And use it as an excuse. Like I think that we're all, for the most part, almost everyone has the capacity of being empathic. I mean,
Right.
for the most part, but most people just live in their heads, so they're actually not tuned into what their information their body is giving them. So yeah, I feel everyone is basically, aside from like maybe like psychopaths, like are empathic to a certain extent, but they just can't feel into it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. So so how did you, with what you went through, like how did you do the work that when you hear people go through similar things that you don't get triggered or you don't get, you know what I mean? Like how did you dissolve those parts of yourself or integrate those parts of you holistically and move forward from that at such a different momentum now?
Like, how did I, like,
How,
I mean, I get triggered still, so.
well, okay, so how do you minimize your triggers then? Or is that part of the process? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, how do you mitigate that?
I think it's not even like, I see triggers now as like an opportunity. I know in like this like kind of politically correct environment, they're like, oh, you got to warn people and not trigger people. But
Yeah, I hear that too.
I know now through my own work that whenever I get triggered, there's something there for me to look at. So it's really great material. Like it's not that I welcome it. Obviously, no one likes getting triggered, but
Right.
it's about like being able to face it directly. So I mean, I get definitely less triggered than I used to because I also know how to handle it. And I think it's also about having the bravery to look into what's there, to like investigate the emotion, being like, like what's going on for me, even just identifying the emotion, allowing it to happen and being like, okay, I feel angry, upset, or whatever you're feeling, and then investigate it. Like, be like, who does this person remind me of? Like, sometimes those memories comes up right away, and you can see what the sequence of the trigger is, and also just finding out how to work with it, like nurture that feeling, or just be with it. Like I think that we live in this, like, I remember, I don't know, I don't see it so much anymore, but there was like this whole like trigger warning thing when people made Facebook posts, and I get that, but like there's no trigger warnings on reality. Like we go out in the world and we're going to get triggered all the time. So I think that, yeah, it's about having the bravery to see your triggers differently and just see them as opportunities for growth.
That is very insightful. That's why I really appreciate your writings, because there's almost like, a generality of people going in a certain direction, and your direction is just like, no, embrace or look at it differently, right? Like, don't do the avoidance thing, right? And be like, well, what's there for me? And then also like explore that and how to move through that, instead of, even with the empath, like that's a different discussion. That, thank you for bringing that up, because I mean, like what I hear now with empaths and compassion or being sensitive or those kind of things, I think now, I mean, I would love for you to expand on this. Like, I feel like there's transformational age right now, and people can feel that there's definitely something different in the air, right? Like it's an accelerated a period, and things are coming up, and yeah, people are getting triggered. There's stuff to fucking work on and all these things. And it's just like, how do we, I'm just trying to think, let me just bring this question more narrow too. Like with an empath or people who are sensitive to people's energy, and you're talking about protection, that there isn't a need to do that anymore.
Well, no, there is. Like, you can go through certain periods, it's like where you need to just focus on your own like deep healing. Like, say if you had like a really traumatic experience in your childhood come up and you are really sensitive, it's like you don't have the space to be of service to others. So you kind of need to make your own little like nest in a way. But yeah, sorry, what was your question? It was like,
no. Well, it's like, if you're picking up on other people's energies, and well, I guess you kind of answered it, and you're feeling on what's happening is that I feel like people are becoming more sensitive to what's going on. Like here's an example. Like I could, or somebody could just sit at a table and you can automatically pick up on somebody's energetic field in that moment. Or you can be like, wow, that person's going through something. Or even get like specific details. And it's like, how do you navigate through all these energies that are like fucking popping up in the air? You know what I mean? And it's like, holy shit. Like, especially, I call it like energetic cosmic waves. Like, there's some times when it's just like, the air feels thick, Laura. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's fucking thick. And it's like, I want to like lay down on the grass and just kind of like, it's like a war zone. Like you said, spiritual warrior, right? I don't know if you want to touch up on that, but it's like, you gotta like duck or like, I don't know. Like there's a lot of energies flying around, and it's like people, then you get to talk about shielding that energy and that kind of stuff. And it's just like, well, that's why I'm like, what's your insight on how to navigate through these times when it's like bubbling up to the surface?
I think for me, it's really about embodiment. Like when we almost get to like, so say someone comes in the room, and we're in a really bad mood, and then it's like we get too attached to their experience and we get out of our own being. You know, like we need to hold our anchor, and this is what our own like meditation practice or spiritual work is for, is able to really maintain our own frequency so that we don't get like kind of like caught up in other people's games. Like, you know, like empathy and compassion is being able to like recognize that feeling, but then also not like identifying with it either. You know, like not be like, oh, you're sad, so I'm going to feel sad and I'm going to feel drained. Like, I feel like,
yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah. And that's also the embodiment, is like working on building up in your own being, because it's like, if you're really strong in your body and you're really centered, like, you know, that's actually when you can be of service to other people. But if you get thrown off by these other energies, it's like, it's also, to me, like in the past, it was also an indication of not knowing how to handle them within myself, you know, like, so the more I was able to confront every type of feeling within myself, it actually opens you up to this more embodied sense of compassion, and nothing can throw you off in that sense. So someone comes on, I mean, it can throw you off, but it doesn't take you over as much. Like someone gets really angry, like the more comfortable you are with your own anger and you've worked within that, the less there's going to be almost like this matching frequency that gets caught into their game. It's hard to describe. It's like if you have a wound or an issue around like anger or sadness, you're not going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to be comfortable dealing with it in other people. But the more that you do it within yourself, it's like you can actually approach those situations from love. But it's also really about embodiment and grounding. I'm realizing more than anything, like the times when I thought I was like hypersensitive, it was almost like I was like way in the etheric realm all the time, like with everybody's like thought forms and emotions.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can literally fucking hear people's thoughts sometimes.
Oh,
like you know what I mean? And it's like, I like how you said it. So I guess what I'm hearing is that the empowerment is to look at your own shit, obviously, but like once you're steady in or comfortable in your own in your own emotions, then that's how you stay steady in your practice. And that's how you can be of service to others, is by being centered and comfortable with who you are.
Yeah. And it's also just about deep embodiment, like being in your being. Like if you like work on your meditation and you're really you're working through like the tension in your body, the karma that's stored in your body, like anytime that I feel I'm getting too wrapped up in someone's experience, I'm actually not in my body. I'm like entering their body or entering their field. Or if I'm feeling hypersensitive, it's like, it's because I'm caught in this like world of like thought forms, you know?
Yes. Yeah, no, I totally agree that. Thank you for saying that's so well said, because I can actually picture that and visualize that as you're saying that. And you're right with like, well, with empaths or just people who can feel, and like you said, everybody has that capacity for that. Is that, you're so right. It's like you get heady, right? And you get super fucking heady, and then you're like, you're right. You're like in this etheric plane, and then you're just having these roundabout conversations. And as you said, with your spiritual practice and embodiment or meditation, then you just get back in your body. Now, even with the word meditation, though, I mean, like define that, Laura. Like what, you know, like because a lot of times it's, you know, people think meditation is about the mind, and to not control the mind, but to let your thoughts float. But how do you get in your body in a meditative state? Like, is it through chanting? Is it through like, how do you, as a facilitator of that with groups, how do you practice that?
Well, I mean, I've tried them all. I've definitely tried all sorts of different types of meditation, but the ones I work now are from the Tibetan Buddhist lineage. So it's like basically like deep belly breathing, and then it's like body scanning. So
Okay.
it's kind of similar to Vipassana, but not quite, because Vipassana actually encourages you to like bypass emotions. And this is actually from a tantric tradition. So it's about embracing the emotions, even sometimes exaggerating them, but then also releasing them. So
That's interesting. So to exaggerate it and then release it, and then the other practice is to, did you say ignore it or just kind of like?
Yeah, so Vipassana is like I mean, I did the Vipassana, like, I mean, Vipassana is just the word that means clear seeing, but the
Okay.
Vipassana meditation centers they have, they're
Okay.
like, a lot of them are like, okay, like anytime an emotion comes up, like you can breathe into it, but then they make it very head centric by being like, focus on the breath and focus on the breath.
Right.
And different traditions have different approaches to this, but the Tibetan Buddhist and the teacher I learned from is a very somatic approach. So it's like being able to be with whatever information arises in the body, and
Okay.
also get people into that state, which really is about like the place below your belly button, like that deep womb space. Like that's where like our embodiment begins, really. That's like our root chakra and like our connection to the earth, basically.
Okay.
So anyway, and basically when I do my meditation now, it's basically deep breathing into that area and then scanning through all the parts of my body. So that's, and a lot of meditation. I mean, I've tried, and like, who am I to say like what is and what isn't meditation? But I've just noticed that all the visualizations and all the stuff that gets you into like the fantasy realm, like that's actually not paying attention to whatever is happening in your being. It's like just putting you out of body again. So if I'm like visualizing doing a guided meditation, or I'm
Yeah.
visualizing going to some stream and then some unicorn meets me there or whatever, like that's
I love
actually
unicorns.
I know that's actually getting me out of body, when I realized all the information you need. That's also what Buddha taught, is like all your history, your karmic situation is all in the cells of your body.
Okay, so when you say karmic history, can you touch a bit on that, and also like soul archetypes? Because there are, like, what does it mean for the individual, and what does it also mean when, and I kid you not, like sometimes you can just meet somebody, whether it be like online or on the street or whatever, have a quick conversation. You're like, there's some sort of fucking connection there that I can't put words to. And you talked about how, and I guess it's different for each scenario or each situation, but like something needs to be expressed between the two physical bodies or souls or something like that. You know what I mean? So like, can you touch a bit on just the karmic relationships and also how that works with soul agreements?
I think that like a lot of us, like before, well, I don't know this for sure. It's just like an idea I like to believe in, just for the record. But we like in order for us to like learn certain soul lessons, like these agreements are made way before we incarnate, and then we
Yes.
incarnate, and even like actually some of the most difficult relationships and situations we have, if we really learn the lesson from it, we can see that it was a larger soul agreement, like, it was a difficult one
Right.
sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I've had that experience a bit, like quite a bit actually. It's just, you recognize, even with my partner, like when I first saw his name, it was like this recognition, like you have this inner knowing, and the
Yes,
more
that goes
you're in tune
beyond
with your,
reason.
yeah, of course, yeah, you just feel it, because it's also, it's also beyond like your human experience, and you just know, and this is also different from when we have these projections as well, like often happens in romantic situations.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just a recognition. So I've definitely experienced that a lot. But I do the opposite. Like I receive the information, and then my mind tries to like just shove it away. I'd be like, oh, like you just don't know this person or whatever.
Yeah, to rationalize it out.
Yeah, because the mind is always like, we were talking about this last night in class. The mind is like trying to make concepts or find reasons for things,
Yes.
especially in the realm of the soul. Like, there's no way that you're going to understand how that works. Like, you're just not. Like,
Right.
like, there's no way, because you don't even know. Like, even when people say, like, it's your karma or whatever, like, they don't know
Yeah,
what your karma is. It's impossible for them to know, because only you will know that, but you won't even know that in this life. Like, it's
that's
not
true too.
for you to see, like, so.
So how do you break through patterns then? Like how do you break through? That's so true, because you wouldn't. Okay, that's a big epiphany for me as well. So thank you for sharing that. But like, how do you? This is tough, because it's like trying to rationalize something that's like a feeling, right? And
Mhm.
like trying to talk about a feeling that Like, when can you say like enough is like, how would you know? How would you know when enough is enough of like if something's meant to be broken or if something's meant to be
In relationships?
yeah, in relationships. And I guess this touches upon like the twin flame concept and also what's a soulmate. And I've heard different definitions with both. So what's your definition on both?
That's just like, yeah. I don't know. Like there's a whole like I actually it's funny. There's like a whole like twin flame like subculture who have like,
Yeah,
these
there
are the
is.
10 signs if they're your twin
Yes.
flame, and if they're not your twin flame, and it's like they become these authorities on who's like, but they don't know either. So I think that like
So what's your take on that? Like, I mean, do you believe that there is such a thing as a twin flame, and or do you believe that was a romantic, like it's
I
hyped up or whatever?
Well, I don't even know because like I know that Sri Aurobindo, who's a teacher I really like, has this like definition on like a twin soul, and
Okay.
that's probably the closest to one that I've heard, is like where you really have this like perfect match. That's actually how I feel about my partner Bernhard, is like just perfect match, like emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically. So all in all the ways, like in a weird that like way that doesn't really happen that often. So I think that I wouldn't define. I do call him my twin flame jokingly, but like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not like, oh, he's my twin flame, because I don't. I also realize too, it's like with I think the danger with the twin flame culture thing is it can create
Okay.
a lot of romantic projections, and then it also is like these are the things to look for in your twin flame, and it's really about that inner knowing that we need to develop, not being like, oh, check, you're probably my twin flame, like, or take an online quiz or something, It's
Right. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
have to have that inner knowing and to trust that that's really what we're trying to develop. So, yeah.
Inner knowing, which is, would you define that as intuition then?
Yeah, something like that. Like just a immediate recognition, like just instant information basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really okay. So that was that's well said, Laura. You're like hilarious, seriously. um, so during these, like, what would you call these times of transformation? Like, what do you call what's energetically happening with the planet right now? How do you define that? Like, there's a lot of things going on politically and a lot of movements and feminist movements and things like that, and with a lot of politics, and it's like there's just a lot of shit happening and coming up to the surface, and I think it does need to, like, how do we transition and move through that? How do we navigate these times?
Meditation really helps. But that's not everything. But I mean, I like the term. I just like seeing it as the Kali Yuga, meaning like everything that's not true has to come to surface. This is like the period of darkness too. And also once we're willing to confront it, like yes, there's a lot of like amazingness in the world all the time, but
Right.
also we're unearthing a lot. Like you see it in the news all the time. There's like
Yes.
always some new issue that's also like it's all coming to light basically, and it's really intense. But I also think it's important, like for me, like I kind of tune into the news, but I'm definitely not the person who like trusts it, because I see it's like just completely fear based, like they're really,
Yeah.
I feel like they're really trying to get people into that frequency, not to say that there isn't totally like awful horrific things happening in the world, but it's about not feeding into that frequency too. So I think that that's really the point. Like, this is a really good concept that I realized in Tibetan Buddhism, is like people are always caught between like hope and fear. So like this true state of like fearlessness is beyond hope and fear. So not being like, oh, I want the world to ascend and it's going to be amazing, or not being like nihilistic and being like, this is awful, this is meaningless, the world is going to shit or whatever,
Right.
and also being beyond that, being like, it is what it is, I'm going to learn how to like face reality directly and deal with whatever comes up, because it's all part of the human experience too. And actually, you know what, things aren't that bad, like considering the stuff they used to do in like Rome and whatever, like watch like Game of Thrones. I know Game of Thrones is a little bit like exaggerated, but I mean like we're actually quite civil to each other these days. We're not like publicly hanging each other or whatever. So things actually are developing in a
In a
sense.
progressive way.
Yeah, I think it's more we're trying to work out like the subtleties, like the psychological and emotional intelligence and all these different things. And yeah, I think it's almost like we're trying to understand, like we've kind of developed the physical world and we're not so much like brutes physically now, but now we're trying to develop that higher like emotional and psychological and spiritual intelligence.
Right.
And that's more subtle, I feel.
So that was well said. With like the empowerment then, how would you define for somebody to empower themselves during these times? Is to do your work, do your shit, move through it, meditate, and well, I keep getting like, don't be afraid of who you are and the things that come up, and not be, just don't be afraid of that. Even when you were talking about the emotions that come up and that working through that, I mean, some of that could be super scary darkness stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, do you get a facilitator? Do you get a coach? Do you get somebody to help you move through that? And how do you help your clients move through that?
Yeah, like, I mean, it can help. Like, we all have teachers that can serve us. So, I mean, it's hard to say. Like, the path is different for everyone. Like, I really can't say what works for one person may not work for another person, although there are like fundamental tools that you can use, but everyone has their path. That's also the point of it, is like everyone has their own specific soul journey. And it's really also about finding like your own, this kind of sounds cliche, but also finding your own deeper purpose, like, and meaning for being here. Like, I feel almost everyone, I think, has a soul purpose for being here that they're set out to achieve, like their dharma. And it's really about finding that. And the only way that we find that is by understanding ourselves, I feel.
I was just going to ask you that, like, how do you know when you're on your path? And it sounds like it's a self-realization.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you'll definitely get signs too, I feel, synchronicities and all sorts of like, and you learn how to read those as well. All sorts of like support. Like, for instance, like, this is kind of a off topic, but like, I was the type of Buddhism I've been studying. I realized, like, years leading up to finding this teacher, I've been getting signs about it all along, like seeing the name. And then even last night, like, I had this amazing experience during my meditation, and I realized the bodhisattva energy I was connecting to was part of the same tradition. And like, all these things kind of fall into place, like. But then it's also, there can be challenges too as well. Like, there's like tests to test our own sincerity as well. Like, for instance, like when I first started writing, like, I felt like people around me weren't very supportive and like very encouraging. And it's also trying to test our own sincerity, So
or your resilience or your courage to keep doing it regardless of what fucking people say.
Yeah, and then there's so many people who like they it's like basic belief work. Like, they put these own limitations on themselves. Like, they feel in their soul what they want to do, but then the mind makes up these reasons why they can't do it. And I'm not like, I'm not, who am I to say whether the reasons are justified or not? But I realize that I would say like the majority of beliefs, like majority of them are things that we invented. So then we can also take them down. And I know from like seeing all sorts of different people and also working through my own stuff is that like a lot of things that people don't think are possible are possible. It's just they're living in this like conditioned experience, like from their parents or from society being like, oh, you can't do this, or you have to do this and this and this to do this, and this is what it has to be. And they're actually not willing to think outside the box and like take those risks.
That is so well. Yeah, it's like this self-imposed construct.
Yeah, and a lot of people, and it's so hard to break people out of those things because it's like their own beliefs as well,
That's
like
been reinforced.
Exactly.
And that's time.
But that's also how meditation is such an important tool, because it allows you to witness things and not act on them, and also see how not take your thoughts so seriously as well. So it gives you that objective perspective, I think. So for anyone, like, I think meditation is useful in that sense, because it can just, so many people identify with their thoughts. And not only that, like a lot of the thoughts that they receive may not even be quote unquote their thoughts. It could be someone else, or like some psychic energy or something.
Yeah.
So it's really about being able to differentiate between like what's like a conditioned thought, like what's a voice from your parent. Like, there's all sorts of different, like, a lot of our thoughts aren't even our own. They were like things that someone said to us when we were a kid or something, or who knows.
How do you go? Okay, so a meditation practice helps in, I guess, like rewiring or resetting those kind of entrenched systems that no longer work? Like, how do you, and then the detachment from those thoughts. And then also there must be something where you have to place new ways of being, or getting a new way of thought, or a new, because it's so weird, because like I hear this so often with the fear-based models and things like that, and it's kind of like, why is the brain turning against itself, you know, in a way?
So wait,
Like,
what do you mean?
like why is the brain, why does the mind, you know, create this construct that no longer works for us, and then we believe in this system that it doesn't, and then we have to break through this construct that we just created that we thought worked for us. It's kind of like a butterfly effect. And then it's like, how can you, you know, it goes with the question of, how do you break an old system when you may not have a new one yet to replace it?
Yeah. Like,
Right?
how do you change a belief, you mean?
Yeah, like, how do you change a belief? How do you change a belief? How do you change a thought pattern? How do you change a habit?
Yeah, I mean, definitely repetition. Like, so doing it, like, I mean, I used to say, I used to use kind of positive mantras when I'm in my meditations before, and
Right.
it was an interesting experience, like, even though I don't do it so much anymore, but just
Like
seeing
the I ams?
yeah, or just being like, you know, like I would basically take a belief that I had, like, so say like I am lazy, and then I would replace it with I am productive, and I would see how much I would say that in my mind, and I would just notice how much resistance I would have to
That's really
accepting
cool. Yeah,
accepting
that's a cool exercise, okay?
and that's also, I mean, that's useful to do just to get some insight, not to say that you can just you can actually train your mind to like create a different belief, but then just seeing how much resistance you have towards certain words, you know. And then I think it depends on the belief, but you also have to kind of explore like what's there, and I think awareness like shines the light on most issues and makes them easier to handle. So
That's
say
true.
if you believe like this fundamental belief like I'm a bad person, and then you remember this experience when you were a kid when you felt like you were really bad, or even past life stuff, like by being able to see that and not identify with it, I think that's a really important thing too, is like not like recognize your emotions without identifying with them, and recognize your thoughts without identifying with them, which is easier said than done. But the issue is we tend to identify with like a feeling or a thought, and then
Yeah.
then we become it basically by identifying with it in our mind.
Right. Well, that's really that's powerfully said. Well, I ask this question to myself sometimes on some days, and I get a different answer all the time. But like, I want to ask you this. So, uh, if you were talking to your future self 5 or 10 years from now, what would she tell you today?
I have no idea. No idea. I have no idea.
Like what?
I can't even tell you what's gonna happen. I gave up on that. I used to try and like, even though I did predict like
Not even
2009.
predict. What kind of advice would she give? What kind of like, you know, like sometimes I get keep going, or sometimes I get like I could see her, right? So what would she say?
I don't know. I have no idea. Enjoy the mystery. I seriously don't know.
Well, that's okay. Well, at least I asked that, and I wanted to know. So thank you for sharing that.
Enjoy the ride.
Enjoy the ride. Okay. Well, just to wrap up here, then, what is next for Laura Matsue? What's coming up for you?
Yeah, so
And I know you're recently married, so congratulations on that.
yeah, my partner Bernhard, he also is a writer, and he writes on this site veilofreality.com, and so he writes about different esoteric and spiritual topics. So we're doing retreats together, and we're doing one in June 3rd to 9th, I believe, in Peru.
So cool.
So yeah, it's gonna be like deep works, meditation, yoga every day, not every day, but meditation every day. And
it's you two running that, or?
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And in the middle of the jungle, and we're also doing a workshop to anyone who lives on Vancouver Island. It's what date is it? April 11th, and it's called Embodying Your True Self, and it's about karma in the body, and it's also about releasing like different contracts, like maybe we made a soul contract with someone back in a lifetime, being able to release the ones that basically don't serve our highest purpose. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And then right now I'm also I'm taking courses basically in Tibetan Buddhism and meditation. And then
Okay.
April, I'm also starting Gabor Mate's Compassionate Inquiry Therapy Program. So I have
Can you just, that was a long sentence right there. What is that?
I got a lot going on right now. Compassionate Inquiry is basically like Gabor Mate, who's like, I'm sure you know him because you're Vancouver, right? Do you know
Well,
who Gabor
I am
Mate?
in Vancouver, but I haven't heard his name. No.
Oh, really? Okay, so he basically specializes in like addiction, trauma. He also has a center in Peru where they work with ayahuasca. So he's a
Okay.
very bit of a different, like conventional. I think he's a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
Okay.
But compassionate inquiry is basically like finding a way to deal with trauma through like finding finding what the spiritual emotional issue is. It's a completely different approach to therapy than what I've
It
seen.
sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is his first year starting this program. So it's basically like the therapeutic model that he uses. He's kind of created a program for it. So
Okay.
yeah, and
Oh,
that's
that's
what I'm
good.
really working on. Yeah, and then I'm going to be moving to California. I'm going through this whole immigration process. So
Oh my gosh, you're gonna be like so US, that's your new home base. Huh?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's the plan. So
We're
going,
gonna miss you.
yeah, gotta go right into like the thick of things.
Oh wow, California! Congratulations! Wow, there's so much new and exciting things that are here and now for you and coming. So,
Yeah.
like seriously, thank you for sharing all that. Thank you so much, Laura, for being on the show, and thank you for sharing all your wisdom and insight. Seriously, it's an honor and pleasure to have you here and for you to share everything that you did. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from you. And everybody can keep in contact with what you're doing at lauramatsu.com, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
And you have
exactly.
your podcast there as well too.
Oh yeah, so I didn't mention that we're also doing a podcast, myself and my partner, called The Cosmic Matrix. So yeah, we release an episode every 2 weeks right now.
Awesome, cool. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching In on the Conversation with Laura Matsue. Just want to say stay tuned for next week's episode. Have you ever wondered what the soul of an octopus looks like or feels like or talks like? Heck, you're going to want to stay tuned with New York Times bestselling author. Oh, here it comes where I insert the name, but you know what? She's coming. So stay tuned. You're going to want to be in on this conversation, let me tell you that. And also hitting the notifications below on our YouTube channel and get binged on new episodes whenever they come up. So thanks again for your love and your support and your friendship, and thanks for watching. Bye!